Our government has provided so many contact numbers for support, which I really appreciate that. But it's really, really difficult to get a hold of anyone. It's just we can't, when we try to call to someone to talk, we can't. So my concern is about immigrants and refugees. How can we make sure that they get the right support?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's actually, I belong to a lot of these, groups that are trying to find ways to address it. For example, in the U.S., they further shut down the border, which I think that Trump has been really looking forward to that for a long time. And there's still some, I'm part of a group that does forensic evaluations, which helps support people in terms of their going in front of the immigration courts to have their asylum granted. So for example, I would do a psychological evaluation on them, which could help support their case about the different trauma they've received and persecution in their countries of origin. We're not able to do that anymore. So there's been a lot of, because I can't do that online, right? So there's a lot of different pieces that unfortunately have been frayed and perhaps disintegrated further due to our current situation. So I think in terms of what can immigrants and refugees do, I would still continue to reach out to the organizations, and hopefully maybe waiting on the line, you're going to get to speak to somebody who can direct you. Mental health clinicians are really challenged because it's hard for us to take on new patients if we've never met them in person. A lot of people don't want to take on new patients they haven't met in person. But there are call-in lines, and in fact, one of the places I trained at, and I'm looking to do some more volunteering with, is with an organization in the U.S. That helps with elder adults and disabled adults of all ages, and it's a suicide prevention line, but it also provides them just mental health support. So I would continue to seek out those resources, and most of them have moved to a type of teletherapy model and are trying to help people. But yes, to be honest with you, it's not a good time to be in need.
No, yeah. What's if you had 1 minute with each, just a message for all those families and those that need support, what's like a 1 minute message in your best words for how they can persevere, get through this type of, maybe it's switching mindset, or how they approach a different situation with their family, or how they best, what's your best message to them if they didn't have time, one-on-one with you?
Well, for me, I think the biggest message I'm always trying to communicate to my patients is just, well, first off, take a breath. That's one step, just to take a pause. And I think then is just to really focus. If there's one word I could give them to take away, it's compassion. This is really, some people say, at least in my own spiritual tradition, love is the lifeblood of the universe kind of thing. And what is one way we can understand that is through compassion, and that includes self-compassion. Okay. Treat yourself in the same way you would treat your best friend or your loved one that you really care about. So I think if we take a pause, take a breath, and then really just say, I'm having a hard time right now. Sometimes it sounds weird to say that to ourselves. I'm having a hard time right now, and I'm sorry. It's amazing how few of us actually stop and say that to ourselves. Instead we say, oh, I'm so, how could I screw this up? How could I do that? But actually, if you just stop and have a pause, and what that does, when you start to show compassion toward yourself, you start to build a relationship back with yourself.
Yeah.
And when you build that internal relationship with yourself, if you've ever had I don't want to say fortune or misfortune, because I feel terrible people go through this, but to work with anybody who's gone through a serious persecution in terms of torture, in terms terms of solitary confinement, because, you know, working in my kind of work, you get exposed to this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that gets people through it, or if you read any of those books about it, is people's reconnecting to their truth.
That's true. Yeah.
And that is like a backbone. That's where you feel your backbone. That is what will carry you through life. That is what gets people through the most horrifying experiences one could ever imagine. That's what gets you through.
I remember reading some of his work, Viktor Frankl, and just what he had to persevere through. I know the Auschwitz survivors, there's a lot of stories and a lot of people that didn't make it, but I know there's a lot of survivors that did, and what they published. It's just your thoughts, or what you've come across on what they did to persevere, because they lost everything, like their homes, their family, health, their freedom. And just like even the light at the end of the tunnel, I mean, they were almost scared into death every day. So it's a very tough subject with everything that's going on today with coronavirus. Maybe just somehow translating their methods or mental frame of mind to today's.
That's a great one, friend. Yeah.
Just what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the book Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which I actually just completed that not too long ago on an audiobook, actually, because I normally had a pretty long commute and I used to listen to a lot of those. And he's absolutely fabulous. And exactly what you're saying. I mean, he lost everything, you know, and seemingly overnight.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, some of the stories he talks about in terms of just, you know, there's this one story of his whole life work had been this research that he had, you know, he had this, and this is before computers and everything, and he had this manuscript that he wanted to he put it in the lining of his coat, and it was his one thing he wanted to hold on to after he lost everything else, and that was also taken from him. I mean, so it was just like, if you want to talk about people's whole entire life just going up in smoke.
Yeah.
And one of the things he talks about is what got him through that experience, quite honestly, for him, was a connection to a broader purpose.
Yeah.
And a focus on, you know, really that broader purpose and a deep, deep connection to his truth, his own internal truth. And I think there's lots of people like that we can look to. Nelson Mandela, who himself was in prison for many years without any sense that he would ever come out.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I think if you read, for example, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was a man who was imprisoned on death row, and I think in solitary confinement for many, many years for a crime he didn't commit. He came out working with the help of an attorney from the Southern Poverty Law Center in the U.S., and he wrote this book, I think, When the Sun Does Shine. And it's basically about this experience of people who've come out of this great period of uncertainty. They've lost everything. Their whole identities have been pretty much destroyed.
Yeah.
And what they came to at the end was not a place of being embittered, and not a place of hatred, but really actually a place of love and deep sense of connection to all of humanity, which might sound a little, you know, out there for somebody who's in the midst of just losing their home or losing their livelihood. It feels like, how could I ever even think of that? I'm only focused on what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting just to jump to that. I think, but through the process of coming to terms with one's loss and recognizing, actually, you know what? This isn't going to destroy me. Who I am is not just my job.
Yeah.
It's not just my my family. As much as I love them, it's not my house. It's not this. There's something deeper that's at the heart of who I am, and that same thing is at the heart of all of us.
That's right.
So really going back to basics, back to our truth in that respect. But I'm not saying it's an easy process.
No, yeah. No, I guess it's a pill that everyone should swallow just for a better frame of mind, I guess.
Well, it's actually, this is life.
Yeah.
This is what life has in store. I mean, if you look across history, one of my very favorite poets, Rumi, his family was in what was then far eastern Iran, which is now present day Afghanistan. And there was a Mongol invasion in the 12th century, and for 2 years his family traveled across all of Iran into Turkey. And now he then becomes this world famous poet, actually top selling poet in the US today. That was informed by, imagine 2 years. And this was before they had refugee camps, before they had ways of distributing food. This is, how many, basically a century ago, back in the 12th century, so centuries ago. And, he grew from that experience. We can all grow from really awful experiences, is one of the messages.
Exactly. It's like, with the corona, it seems like it's forcing everyone to think or like grow through this hard time and persevere instead of being in comfort mode all the time, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. It's not something I think that any of us would welcome and hope for, that this would happen. But again, this is what we're faced with now. So it's exactly like, what do we do now? And not something that we're all kind of being forced to look at.
Yeah, kind of like you said, like connecting to inner truth and just relying more on ourselves instead of the things around us and merchandise and things that we've built up or things that we've acquired.
Yeah, I think all of us are feeling less, I'm definitely not as interested in my own wardrobe and things like that these days as I once was, because it's like, well, who knows when I'm going to go out again.
No, definitely. It was a great conversation, and hopefully one day we have you here in Canada, in Alberta.
Well, thank you all for inviting me on.
Thanks,
I don't pretend to think that I had anything that profound to say, but it was really nice to speak with all of you and connect. And I really, really wish you well. And well, with the podcast, I think you're definitely, you're growing from this experience, as we all are. But it's not to belittle how absolutely heart-wrenching it is. It really, really is. And I'm sorry about all of it.
No, we appreciate that for your time and for your knowledge and experience. You're brilliant, and thanks for everything.
Thanks, Leah.
Well, thank you for your kind words. I don't know about all that, but I appreciate it, and sending you all lots of love.
You too.
Thanks.
Okay, take care.